Hello, Gino here, and you are listening to Otherworld Connections. We live in a critical time where now, more than ever, angels and fairies, hidden forces, are bursting at the seams of the veil to work with us. They want to see us change in order to save the world and live in service to others. So join me on a journey to empowerment and enlightenment with an angelic angle and a fairy focus, looking into ways to improve our current situation, morality, archetypes, solutions for self-healing, and spiritual sciences in light of theosophy and other occult traditions.
Hello. Hello. Welcome back to Otherworld Connections. And a reminder that you can find the link to anything I read or refer to during this show in the description of this episode once it's published on my website, thesecretkindergarten.com, and of course on all my channels on YouTube, otherworldconnections.substack.com, Odyssey, Rumble, and on the podcast platforms. In other news, I will say I got an. I am going to be performing, at an online music festival. True story. I used to be a bit of a rock and roller when I was younger. Well, more of a drug user, but I love writing songs, and I can't believe I was invited to perform. So I will provide more information about that in the coming weeks. And I feel so good about that. So I hope those people don't change their mind. But it won't matter because it's motivated me to get back into creating. And you know what? I promise you, it's going to be pretty good. Obviously, it depends what style of music you're into, but it's going to be good. It's going to be just me, an electric guitar, and there's backing tracks. So it is a little bit like, some people don't like that. But hey, I've got no friends. I don't know a drummer or a bass player. I'm one of those people that says I can play the bass, I can play the drums, and then I offend everybody because I can't really. Well, I can, but not. I can't play the bass as well as a bass guitarist. I can't play the drums like a real drummer. I can get by with the power of punk rock music. Well, it's probably more pop music with loud guitars, but hey, that is happening. Gino V. Live. At least it's going to be a live recording. I don't fancy getting up at 3 a.m. to perform music in my man cave. Anyway, so that's the news. So yeah, there we go. So, I'm a man of many pursuits. Oh. So, why did I stop talking? Because we're going to talk about what's happening today. We are continuing the reasons for deleting, eliminating, banishing, burning fairy tale books. The top 5 reasons. Reason number 1 is fairy tales are too violent for children. Incorrect. And I hate that throwaway comment because people brush off all my work with that as the number 1 reason for me to not waste my time doing this. Well, I get a lot out of it, so I'm not wasting my time. You're causing problems. And this is about why you're causing problems for throwing away the idea of reading fairy tales. And I'm talking about fairy tales in their unexpunged form. Who are you and who am I to edit these fairy tales that are most likely as old as time itself? Who the heck are you to do that? Just on some throwaway comment, and we're going to try and inspire, eliminating throwaway reasons like that because they're not based in reality, and especially in Los Truth Movimentos. In the truth movement. You should not be saying things like that if you're a parent. Oh, fairy tales are too far. I'm not doing that. You are a poo-poo for doing that. So I'm going to explain why. Oh, well, my handler's not here today, so Julia's not keeping me out of trouble. So I'm going to get myself into trouble. We are looking at... Okay, straight into it. The blade of straw, the coal, and the bean. Page number 87 from The Complete Fairy Tales Vintage Grimm. I mean, people say even the Grimm brothers kind of, either lightly or heavily edited these. I don't entirely agree with that. I think, if you read these and then you look at contemporary, I'm putting these up against like 2025 fairy tales. Anyway, 2025 fairy tales, have you looked at them, guys? We're talking, oh my gosh. We're talking LGBT, rainbow, tranny town. We really are. We really are. It's unbelievable. So, yeah. I mean, fairy tales are just getting... Anyway, so we're bringing it back here. And I'm going to read, this is a quick one. The straw, the coal, and the bean. There once was a poor old woman who lived in a village. And she had gathered a bunch of beans that she wanted to cook. So she prepared a fire on her hearth, lighting it with a handful of straw to make it burn faster. As she was emptying the beans into the pot, one of them slipped to the floor unnoticed and lay next to a straw. Soon after, a glowing coal jumped from the hearth and joined the other two. Then the straw began to speak. "Dear friends, where have you come from?" "Fortunately, I jumped out of the fire," responded the coal. I forgot something. I am on video. That is shameful. Lucky I didn't pick my nose or something. But here we are. Get the right page up. The straw, the coal, and the bean. So the coal jumped out of the fire and he said, "If I hadn't used sheer force, it would have been the end of me. I would have been burned to ashes." "I also escaped by the skin of my teeth," said the bean. "If the old woman had thrown me into the pot, I'd have been cooked into a soup without mercy like my comrades." "Do you think my fate would have been any better?" said the straw. "The old woman let all my brothers burn up in smoke. She grabbed 60 all at once and put them to death. Fortunately, I slipped through her fingers." "Well, what should we do now?" asked the coal. "Since we were so lucky to escape death, I think we should stick together like good comrades," the bean said. "Also, we'd better begin heading for a foreign country before there's a new fatality." The proposal pleased the other two, and they set out on their way. However, they soon came to a small brook. And since there was no bridge or way over it, they did not know how they would manage to cross it. Then the straw came up with a good idea and said, "I'll lay myself across, and then you'll be able to walk over me like a bridge." So the straw stretched itself from one bank to the other, and the coal, who had a fiery temperament, marched boldly onto the newly built bridge. Yet, when it was halfway across and heard the water murmuring below, it got frightened, stopped in its tracks, and did not dare go any further. But now the straw began to burn, broke in 2 pieces, and fell into the brook. The coal tumbled after, and as it hit the water, it gave up the ghost. The bean, which had cautiously stayed behind, had to laugh when it saw what happened. But it was unable to stop and kept laughing so hard that it burst. Now, it would have been all over for the bean were it not for a travelling tailor, who had been resting near the brook. He felt so sorry for the bean that he took out his needle and thread and sewed the bean together. The bean thanked him most kindly, but because the tailor had used black thread, all beans since then have had a black seam. Yes, a black seam indeed. So that's a cool one to tell the kids, because then they can look at a bean and see the black thread. And then, as the homeschooler leader that you might be, you can then extend that to the garden, planting beans, making them grow. That's probably one of the simplest and more powerful ones with the bean theme, something with a fairy tale with a bean, Jack and the Beanstalk, or this one, and then moving on to planting beans in the garden. That's some of the best quote-unquote education that you can give to 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. So yeah, the point of my story today is that we are looking at in a way, I'd say it's not being able to have one thing without the other. And we'll discover what I mean as we go through the show. So we're going to look at Marie-Louise von Franz's book, Archetypal Patterns in Fairy Tales, from 1915. Here she is now. Marie-Louise von Franz, 4th of January 1915 to 17th of February 1998. She was a Swiss Jungian psychologist and scholar, known for her psychological interpretations of fairy tales and of alchemical manuscripts. She worked and collaborated with Carl Jung from 1933, when she met him, until he died in 1961. And we're going to look at her book, Archetypal Patterns in Fairy Tales. I would say so far in the decoding series of Otherworld Connections, looking at fairy tales, this book, Archetypal Patterns in Fairy Tales, is probably the best one I come across. Thus far. So I say this is recommended reading for sure, everybody. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to look at Chapter 6, talking about the blade of straw, the coal, and the bean. So I'm just going to read 10 minutes of it, just to look at the decoding. We're just going to get an idea of what I'm trying to spit out in this show. Here we go. Now, I will tell you some amplifications. So she says amplifications. We've used the word plurality. Yeah. Amplifications of the straw, the coal, and the bean. Straw is that part of the corn which is thrown away. In the past, it was either burned or ploughed under the soil. Viewed negatively, it is useless and to be thrown away. But viewed positively, it is the part we give back to nature. Very often after the harvest, one made a puppet of straw and burned it up as a sacrifice to the vegetation spirits. In many countries, the people believe there is a spirit living in the corn. This spirit is responsible for the harvest and for the fertility of the fields. As soon as the corn is cut, the corn spirit retires into the cobs. It is immortal. It stays in the cobs through the winter and then sprouts again the next spring with the new corn. So the straw is the corn when it is in its dormancy, its underworld phase, latent and hidden but not dead, still holding the promise of a new crop for the next season. In many countries there are also festivals of the May bridal couple or the Whitsun bridal couple. Or in England they hold a festival for the May Queen. During these festivals, puppets are made from straw and sometimes also from spring flowers and burned up. In Poland, the Guild of Tailors made a straw sack, which was then burned. As our Zurich Boog at Ciceloten is burned in a spring festival to chase away the spirits of death and winter and as a sacrifice to revive the spirit of the corn and the fertility of the new year. So you see how things begin to fall into place. We even have a connection with the tailor. The straw has to do with the underworld. In more modern times, straw has the negative connotation of futile, meaningless, worthless nonsense. St. Thomas Aquinas, about 4 or 5 weeks before his death and during the writing of his famous Summa, came to the chapter about penitence. At that time he had an overwhelming experience of the unconscious. Suddenly he sat in his cell, completely confused and upset. Then he put the pen away and said, "All I have written is straw." Later on, in order to prevent misunderstanding, church historians added, "All I have written is straw in comparison to what I saw and experienced." I think that is true. Thomas had an overwhelming experience that made him see that the scholastic, intellectual, theological way in which he exposed the Christian truth was only straw, compared to what he had experienced inwardly. In many religious texts of the Gnostics, and also in the Bible, separating the wheat from the straw means to separate what is to be immortal, what is going to survive, from the unwanted portion which is to be burned away. The alchemists also said that in the alchemical process, all futilities and superficialities had to be removed or burned. Straw has that utterly negative connotation of being something that must be discarded. Now, it is very irritating when someone comes for an analytical hour and then tells you for the entire 60 minutes about some futile quarrel with a neighbour or something like that. Other people, out of fear touching their own complexes, sometimes spend 60 hours prattling on about utter nonsense, and they do so with a kind of unemotional blah 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 voice. There's no emotional melody underlying such speeches, so I suspect that they themselves think it is all nonsense. They know it is, but they won't touch the real problem. So they talk and talk nervously about all their trivia. I even had one such man who always began to yawn when he talked like that. He himself was bored. I almost said to him, "Have you noticed you are yawning?" "Why?" You see, he knew it was all straw. He was merely beating the straw. But that was a clue that he was hiding something very hot inside. The negative aspect of straw shows up in our story. The straw cannot make a solid bridge. It's too insubstantial. It is the cheap, useless aspect of the straw that is displayed in our story. It is incapable, and it is also a boaster. It offers to make itself into a bridge when the hot coal touches it. It collapses entirely. It cannot do what it wants to do. Next we come to the coal that jumped out of the fire. In antiquity, the only form of coal widely used was charcoal. Real coal was known only in the Orient. In Western alchemy, the charcoal was mixed with carbuncle and quicksilver. They believed that quicksilver, especially in its combination form as cinnabar, was identical with coal. So you see, the Western people had only a vague idea of what coal was. In early alchemy it was called anthrax. That is still a name for certain coals, and anthracite comes from it. The theory was that it was the basis of certain types of prima materia, the basic matter of stones and of the earth. According to certain early alchemical theories, the basic material of the metals was water, and the basic material of the stones and the different types of earth was that mysterious anthrax. So coal was the very essence of concrete reality. Because of its blackness, coal was naturally associated with the underworld. Later, a rich folk tradition arose that the coal miners, because they were quote-unquote black men who worked in dangerous conditions, were great magicians from under the earth. They knew the secrets of Mother Earth. Even today, miners sometimes bring up the most marvelous crystals, or they discover a precious metallic ore. Thus, they are the ones who discover and dig up the treasures from under the earth. They are like the alchemists, the great magicians of the past, in having something uncanny and otherworldly about them, because they work in the dark. Miners were also believed to be slightly devilish, because one felt that it was a hubris, a devilish boldness to dig into Mother Earth and rob her of her hidden, secret treasures. Just a moment, I think I've got Mimi at the door. Alright, she's wandered off, that's good. She likes to jump on the keyboard and that'll ruin everything. Alright, so coal represents the secret essence of the visible world. Right. Many alchemists claim that coal also contains a hidden fire. You see, if you light coal with a match or with a handful of straw, as in our story, it slowly begins to glow. And since it glows inwardly, it doesn't quickly burn away like wood or straw. The idea emerged that coal contains a burning fire hidden under its black surface. You could bring out this hidden fire by putting some fire from the outside in contact with it. As a result of this association with hidden fire, coal came to represent the passionate nature of man. It is especially associated with the hottest passion, namely repressed, unexpressed passion. We have a German proverb that says, "Nothing burns as hot as a great love nobody knows about." Such is the nature of the coal fire. When you burn inwardly from love or hatred, or a seething grudge, and keep it inside, it becomes much, much hotter than if you had reacted externally. So that's just a point there about, expression, like kids expressing themselves. This no violence thing. Kids need to use physical force to stop themselves from being attacked by other children. It's as simple as that. So you don't burn inwardly. So that's just part of why I'm reading this chapter, this decoding of the fairy tale we're reading today. The blade of straw, the coal, and the bean. Okay. Such burning stays in the bottom of your body, and it can also lead to many somatic diseases. So the hidden fire of the coal therefore has to do with the devil and with the black demons of the underworld. But we must remember that they are also the keepers of treasure. And now we come to the bean. In the Greco-Roman world, the bean belonged to Hades, the realm of the dead. It was the food of the dead. In the Pythagorean communities, the eating of beans was strictly forbidden. Beans were taboo because they belonged to the ancestral spirits. We found a similar taboo in our story of Mriel, who shouldn't have eaten the bull because it belonged to the moon people and the spirits of the dead. In Switzerland, we have what is called the Salige Lut, the wild hunt. Here and in many other European countries, the dead go about with wotan in the dark of the night from the last days of October until the second day of November. That is always the time when there are big storms and the wind god is very much in evidence, under the guidance of Hermes Mercurius in the antique realm, and of Wotan and on the other side of the Alps, the dead come from the underworld and wander about, and they eat only beans. On the other hand, beans were also believed to be an aphrodisiac. They improved one's sexual powers. In antiquity, therefore, the Romans and the Greeks sang certain so-called obscene bean songs, which were supposed to increase one's sexual potency. So we discover the strange fact that the realm of sex and the realm of the dead belong together, mythologically speaking. That is why the philosopher Heraclitus said of the Dionysian processions in the street where one carried red wooden phalli and sang obscene songs, if it weren't Hades, the god of the dead, for whom they make this procession and sing the phallic songs, it would be an obscene thing. But Dionysus and Hades are one. Behind this tie between sex and death lies the archetypal fact that clowning and macabre fun, the enjoyment of wild, uncivilized exuberance, are really very close to death. In our country, especially in the villages, it is still quite usual that people have real fun at funerals. At first you are very sad, but then you begin to drink. And since a funeral is a big family gathering of people who haven't often seen each other for years, the dinner parties after the funerals end in absolutely marvellous festivals. Isn't that lovely? This is not as heartless as it might look. Jung once said to me, "It is because these people are still very much like the primitives, who felt the danger of death, of being gripped by the coldness of death. Therefore they assert life by getting drunk and being vulgar and funny. Therefore they assert life by getting drunk." Oh, I just said that. One asserts life and one's connectedness with one's fellows in order to chase away that cold shiver one feels after having borne a loved one to the grave. It is as if one was saying, "We are still here, we must go on, we must live. We must now love each other and be together with each other in order to chase away that cold hand of death still hovering over the ceremony." So it is not heartless. This double experience of death and exuberance belongs to the world of the Great Mother. All the rituals for Hades Dionysus had to do with Mother Earth and the earth cult of the gods of the underworld, the maternal world, and perhaps that is why something doesn't sit right when someone says to me, or to one that understands fairy tales are important, that, "Oh, we're not going to read these fairy tales, they're too violent." Sorry. And one of the things I want to say about that is the people that tell me that, they have zero sense of humour and they're absolutely no fun to be around at all. So if you go around saying that to people when they talk about the importance of fairy tales, you're a bore, you're no fun to be around, you're not invited to the party. Oh dear, but it's true. It's true. So yes. So there's you can't have one thing without the other kind of thing. So if you're removing all the violence and death from the fairy tales, editing that out or not reading it. I think the kind of people that are driven by that, they're driven by wrapping kids up in cotton wool. Hey, I don't blame them. Like, I mean, I admire them for having children, that they do have some courage, and that's what they do have a lot of courage, more than me in that regard, absolutely. I don't have kids. So it gives me a kind of cognitive dissonance, because I think they've got the courage to have kids, but then they want to not let them do anything or not allow them to be around any kind of things associated really with risk. And what I'm trying to lead to here is, especially reading Marie-Louise von Franz's work, it shows, I'm hoping it shows that, if you try to call everything violence, and you want to protect children and have them not have anything happen to them, and not give them the opportunity to stick up for themselves. I'm not talking about you should be violent to children. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're trying to remove aspects of being a human being, then it's going to affect them inversely later in life. Kids that are mollycoddle protected and don't have much like that happening to them are going to suffer. They're going to have trouble having fun when they're older. That's what I'm trying to get at. And it'll become clearer why as we go on. But I better go on, because we are running out of time. And then my point doesn't get made, and then it's just all for nothing. So, where the heck is that? All right. Beans. Beans have another interesting quality. They grow so high. In many European countries, one plants beans on Ascension Day so that they may grow high and go up with Christ when he ascends to heaven. In many myths and fairy tales, a hero plants a bean and climbs up to heaven on the stalk. So the bean has not only a strong underworldly quality, but also the capacity to connect us with the beyond. The bean is a better bridge than the blade of straw. The bean is the only one in our story who is wise. The coal is a fool because she is so hot-tempered, and the straw is a superficial boaster. But the bean has wisdom, and the bean can connect heaven and earth. Like everything connected with the land of death, the underworld and the unconscious, the bean also has to do with luck and oracles. So, yeah, just saying that, like, there's more going on than just a bean, right? So when there's violence in fairy tales, quote unquote, when there's physical force or there are crimes being committed or bad things happening in fairy tales, there's all this other stuff going on behind the scenes. And the behind the scenes stuff, the underworldly stuff, is what the kids are closer to and more connected to than us. Alright, so the bean can connect heaven and earth. Like everything connected with the land of death, the underworld and the unconscious, the bean has to do with luck and oracles. Oh, excuse me, I already read that. Here we go. In many countries, one puts the seeds of beans in a coffin and then takes them out again and throws them like an I Ching and counts them to discover the lucky number to pick for the lottery. So you see here a whole realm of things that belong together. Undeserved luck, death, and the pure nature aspect of the unconscious, with its not understandable meaning or its meaninglessness. We have therefore an underworldly triad assembling at the hearth of the old lady. All things which belong to the underworld realm, death, the unconscious, the gods of sexuality, and Rabelaisian wildness. That triad of straw, bean, and coal assembles at her hearth. and then they decide to go away together. And I just say here that this triad, so the gods of sexuality, well, Dionysus is also the god of wine, and kind of all the things Dionysus is the god of, it kind of gives the theme a little bit of like partying, having fun, right? And because we're talking about kids, obviously we're desexualizing things, right? So death, the unconscious, having fun, and like sort of wildness, these are all things that kids are more connected with coming from the underworld than we are, because first off, they're closer to death than us. If we all live a long, happy, healthy life, God forbid, and I wish that for you, then kids are closer to death than we are if we go backwards, right? So we can't remove death from fairy tales and the concept of death, and you can't anyway, because when you allow kids to play freely, which is another thing, the kind of people that say we're not going to do that are the kind of people that possibly or probably don't let kids play freely because they don't like what comes up. They don't like it. They don't know how to deal with it, and they're afraid. Perhaps I'm projecting a little bit. I am. So, yeah, that's that there. So off they go. And right, skipping forward a little bit. Oh my gosh, running out of time. Come on, this has to be read. Also, it is well known that at meetings and festivals, mainly under the influence of alcohol, people can suddenly snap into quarrelsomeness. Sometimes people are even killed at folk feasts that begin quite happily. They are trampled down or shot in drunken arguments. The redeeming jollity in an enantiodromian switch, don't even know, honestly, of course I don't know what that word means, snaps into dissociated destructiveness. So you see again the close, mysterious relationship between joking, merriment, and the deepest sadness, even death. So there's a relationship between joking, fun, happiness, and merriment, and sadness and death. Okay? So I'm saying, if you don't let kids, and this is kind of a deviation, but we're still talking about really violence, right? We're talking about what violence really is a violation of people's rights, causing harm. So if you, for example, if you don't allow kids to stick up for themselves, they are going to have problems with morbidities and sadness when they're older. If you allow them to express themselves and defend themselves and just naturally do what they should do when people are causing harm to them, let them deal with it, encourage them to deal with it, support them in dealing with it, well, you're going to be supporting them to be merry and happy and living life more like a celebration rather than dealing with mental health issues from resentment building up inside from not doing anything about it. And we're not going to read, we don't read fairy tales to our kids because they're violent. Those two concepts are tied in because the lack of the understanding of what violence is and what physical force is, the difference between the two, and which one is okay and which one is not. And also you find that once children are supported to express themselves physically, and that also includes using their words, oftentimes what happens is not even that bad. The bully gets what they need. Might be a slap in the face. It might be a punch in the face. It might be a getting up in their face and yelling at them. The child's going to express themselves how they are. And you start to restore balance in society and in the community, in the classroom, in the playground, at the park. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Okay. Where was I? I was taken away by my own little rant there. Swept away. So there is always a dangerous closeness between these two states of mind. Schopenhauer once said that the sense of humour is the only divine quality in humans. And this really ties in with everything that I'm saying. That the self-defense principle is the most important thing. It's the most important thing, 2025. What I mean by that? That the kids need to be aligned with that, not derailed from that. And we live in a world that the kids are being actively derailed from an alignment with the self-defense principle. And as we've shown here, or we've discovered here, well, I've got to stop ranting actually, because we're going to look at the Rosicrucian principles of child training to show you that we do know, if you've been following, that there's like an inversion thing with kids. Okay, and the sort of inversion here is, physical force, violence, all these things that people call violence, when it's not all violence, all that stuff, deleting that from childhood promotes a deletion, is to delete fun, happiness, merriment, and enjoyment in adulthood. Okay, everything's upside down and reversed with the kids because they're still in the underworld or the other world, or they're still in God's hands. So you're taking away their sense of humor. You're making them victims, feeling sorry for themselves, making them drags to be around. You're making them people that people don't want to be around. People who have no sense of humor. Speaking of Schopenhauer, once he told me that he made it a great point to see if his patients had a sense of humor. People who have no sense of humor are very difficult to treat. And if they are psychotic, they are practically incurable. On the other hand, even severely psychotic people sometimes have a sense of humor. Of those, Jung would say, "Oh, take them. They have such a sense of humor. You might not cure them, but you can keep them afloat." So I'm just going to skip ahead. You see the strange taste of this closeness between madness, danger, death, and the divine sense of humor. But too much of it is inflation. The gods may laugh like they do in Homer's Iliad. But one must keep one's own laughter within certain bounds, and at certain things we must not laugh at all. A god may, but we may not. We must remember our limitations and our mortality. The bean forgot. She went too far and became dissociated. But in the end it didn't matter because there was a friendly, warm-hearted tailor to sew her back together. Okay, I think my point has been made, so I'm going to leave it there. Apologies for the pause. We're going to now move to the Rosicrucian principles of child training from the writings of Max Heindel. This is published by the Rosicrucian Fellowship in Oceanside, California. And I had brought up I thought I brought up Max Heindel. Anyway, so this is a little bit about how it works for kids in terms of spiritual sciences in light of the Rosicrucian mystery tradition. Let's have a quick look here. During the earlier years, the forces operating along the negative pole of the reflecting ether are extremely active. So there's still this idea of polarity, the opposite polarity or reflecting. So extremely active negative pole of the reflecting ether, that's already giving us this idea of like this opposite kind of thing that I've been trying to unfold here in this show today. The purest of our children are clairvoyant, to this day while they remain in a state of sinless innocence. And clairvoyance is, kind of like a polarity to just presence in 3D reality, right? So also the Lemurians. Oh, I'm beeping here. What's that all about? That's all right. Okay, just keep going. Yes. So also the Lemurians, who were yet innocent and pure. So looking at Lemurians, Lemuria, that's the kind of thing that, is absolutely a possibility if we let the children lead and listen to people like Max Heindel, Rudolf Steiner, hold reverence for the children and read fairy tales, so on and so forth. They possessed, the Lemurians, an internal perception which gave them only a dim idea of the outward shape of any object, but illumined so much the brighter their inner nature, their soul quality, by a spiritual apperception born of innocent purity. Likewise, in their early years, children can see the higher worlds, and they often prattle about what they see until the ridicule of their elders or punishment for telling stories teaches them to desist. And in these stories can be death and violence. Often in the stories there is death and violence. And there's also self-defense and physical force, which are perceived as violence by people that don't understand the difference. It is deplorable that the little ones are forced to lie, or at least dent the truth, because of the incredulity of their quote-unquote wise elders. Even the investigations of the Society for Psychical Research have proved that children often have invisible playmates, who frequently visit them until they are several years old. During those years, the clairvoyance of the children is of the same negative character as that of the medium. Just observe a 3-year-old girl. Observe a 3-year-old girl. A girl that has just turning 3 or has just turned 3. And, you tell me that they don't have invisible playmates. It is the same with the forces working in the desire body. The passive capacity for feeling physical pain is present, while the feeling of emotion is almost entirely absent. The child will, of course, show emotion on the slightest provocation, but the duration of that emotion is but momentary. It is all on the surface. Thus, it is shown that all the negative qualities are active in the newborn entity, but before it is able to use its different vehicles, the positive qualities must be ripened. And that's why distracting children is actually really, really good. Imagine being able to distract yourself so you don't get stuck in a rut. Like something upsets you and you can just immediately just go, you know what? Okay, I was upset, move on, switch off, boom. Okay, maybe you can do that. Maybe you're a psychopath and you don't even get that. But hey, when children are upset, distracting them to bring the party back, this is my opinion, it's a good thing. Because it's momentary anyway for them. Okay, so the child has the link of mind, but is almost incapable of individual thought activity. It is exceedingly sensitive to forces working along the negative pole of the mind, as is therefore imitative and teachable. So children are imitating. So if you're reading a story, a fairy tale, you are imbuing the qualities to the child of, the kind of person that wants to read an important story to kids. You're not inspiring them to go and chop heads off. Sounds like Ernie is getting rowdy outside. So yeah. It must not be imagined that when the little body of the child has been born, the process of birth is completed. The spirit, having built many physical bodies, produces them quickly. But the vital body is a later acquisition of the human being. For this reason, we are not so expert in building that vehicle. Consequently, it takes longer to construct the vital body from the materials not used up in making the lining of the archetype, and it is not born until the 7th year, or the time when the child cuts its second teeth. The desire body is still a later addition of the composite man, and is not brought to birth until the 14th year, or the time of puberty, while the mind, which makes man man, does not come to birth until the 21st year. In law, that age is recognized as the earliest time at which the individual is fitted to exercise the franchise. So 0 to 7, the play makes the person. And 7 to 14 is about feeling and emotion, bringing to 14 where the desire body, and desire kind of resonates with the term emotion to me. And then 14 to 21 where the actual, what people believe or see as education is what you do then. Actual, like, okay, now we're going to learn about this, direct instruction type stuff, is the mind, bringing the mind online to 21. Another way to look at it is 0 to 7 is the play and letting the kids be kids and doing their thing and letting them lead. Just brain development, physical, actual brain growth and development to create the brain that has the capacity to deal with emotions and process emotions from 7 to 14, and then learn and use the mind in age 14 to 21. So if you look at the trivium, thoughts, emotions, and actions, it's reversed. 0 to 7 is actions. 7 to 14 is emotions, because that's in the middle anyway. And then 14 to 21 is the thoughts. So teaching kids how to think is for 14-year-olds up. Okay, so respecting... Oh, we've got 1 minute left. So it is a duty of the educator to give the proper environment. And I was going to just show a quick study that earlier violent television exposure and later drug dependence is a connection to violence. Too much violence leads to too much fun later in life, too much party seeking. But anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope that made sense. Much love, everybody. I'll see you at the next one.